don't forget how amazing, precious, divine, beautiful girl that's made for eternity.
That describes me. It made lots of sense.
I didn't think we'd be in 2025 where Netflix, of all studios, decides to make an entire show out of infantilizing autism. Recently, I ended up checking out the show Love in the Spectrum on Netflix, which has actually been recommended quite a few times before as a show for me to watch. And oh boy, was this really something. Love in the Spectrum has actually been a very highly acclaimed show ever since it debuted in 2022, and it just recently debuted a third season on Netflix. In addition to this, it seems to be very well received on IMDb, where it boasts an overall critical rating of 8.4, which is actually very high for a TV show. So that probably means this show was actually really positive and showed autistic people in a really good, respectful light, right?
False.
Sadly, no, it very much does not. Love on the Spectrum is unfortunately a very poor representation of romance between autistic people and is also alarmingly exploitative with a lot of the things it showcases here, choosing to treat the autistic people on set more like animals in a zoo being put on display more than anything else. So today, I want to discuss why Love on the Spectrum is genuinely awful autism representation, but also how autistic romance can actually be done well in media, since it has been before, believe it or not. But to start, let's discuss exactly what Love in the Spectrum is and how it came to be. Also, inevitably, Netflix has been claiming in this video since I first uploaded it, since I'm pretty sure they don't want this message out there. So I've gone and done some things to the footage to hopefully bypass that. So if you see any like weird anime girls showing up over the footage, that's why. Thanks for nothing, copyright! Love on the Spectrum initially began life as an Australian TV series broadcast on ABC TV starting in 2019. This show was actually created by Cyan O'Cleary, who previously had been best known for working on location management for the film Star Wars Episode 3 of Revenge of the Sith. And no, that is not a joke, that is a real credit on his IMDb page, so at least he worked on one actually good thing. Seriously though, Revenge of the Sith is unironically my favorite Star Wars movie. Maybe someday I'll do a full video talking about that. Love in the Spectrum also ended up becoming a surprising success for O'Cleary in Australia, resulting in him trying to bring it over to Netflix in the United States. Filming for the American version began in 2020 in the midst of the pandemic and wrapped in 2021, with the show actually releasing on Netflix in 2022. Love in the Spectrum itself essentially follows the lives of various autistic people who are looking to date, with O'Cleary and various showrunners recording their every move and trying to set up blind dates for each of them. The first season of this show features 11 different autistic people in particular, all from different walks of life and also different age groups, with each being paired with a date chosen by the showrunners, usually one that they might think would be a good match for the autistic person. Already, I think this show presents a pretty massive problem from the get-go in the fact that the show itself seems to forego any sort of natural dating process for the autistic people it features, and instead of letting them get a feel for a variety of people and letting them form a natural bond with somebody they might end up liking, this show often just seems to draw random other people out of a hat to try and pair with an autistic person featured in the show. We can't let them have time for development. We need to keep our season at 6 episodes so we can keep people's interest and make money from exploiting autistic people. This all comes off as honestly very inauthentic, which of course is usually par for the course with any sort of reality TV show. But the fact it is specifically using autistic people in an environment like this, and more or less putting them on display for the audience to ooh and ah at like animals in a zoo, makes this particular scenario feel especially gross. See, look guys, they're just like us neurotypical people. They can go on dates too because we arranged it for them. Now why don't you go ahead and binge this show to give us more money? Strangely enough, despite this show has been very highly praised by the majority of critics, and as I stated before, this show holds a pretty impressive rating of 8.4 on IMDb, which actually puts it in the IMDb top 300 for TV shows, with the likes of Breaking Bad, Planet Earth, Adventure Time, Steins, and Cowboy Bebop. By the way, if you like any of the shows I just listed, you should subscribe for more content like this, since I mostly discuss television, film, and video games here overall. If you have a specific piece of media you think I should cover here on YouTube, tell me in the comments below, or join my Discord to specifically request it there. Plus, interact with a lot of like-minded people overall. You can also check out my letterbox to see my reviews of other movies and shows that I won't always cover here on YouTube. All links are down in the description. Upon looking at individual reviews for this show, it becomes very apparent who this show is actually for. This show is not aimed at autistic audiences, nor is it even concerned with putting autistic people in a respectful light, but rather this show is exclusively targeting neurotypical people, as a way to exploit autistic people for not much more than inspiration porn. One review here very much highlights this from a neurotypical user on IMDb, which reads, "This show is so pure and perfectly produced, letting these amazing people find themselves and hope for love in a partner is just so heartwarming. I love this way this show gives us an inside look into autism and people on the spectrum that we don't normally get to see. It's amazing how much you can identify with these people as a neurotypical. Gee, maybe that's because autistic people are still people." Obviously, being on the spectrum, there are often difficulties that come with socializing with those around you, but ultimately an autistic person is still more than capable of finding love or putting themselves out there to go on dates if they really want to, just like any person would be able to do. The way this show treats the autistic people on screen, it feels more like they're being treated like helpless babies and just straight up infantilized. The way they're framed just makes it feel like the audience is either supposed to laugh at them or find them adorable while they're being filmed every single second, which is just super gross. Even the music utilized throughout this show just seems to make this all the more apparent, since instead of going with the score the majority of reality TV shows tend to go with, they instead use a score that sounds more like something from a kid-focused nature documentary.
Having not found a connection with Candida, Steve is back online looking for romance with the help of personal assistant, Showray.
Young Harris antelope squirrels are busy tasting the world around them and generally having fun. They're blissfully oblivious to danger slithering near.
This is a 63-year-old man, and they are using the same type of music for him as they do for baby squirrels. It's absolutely mind-blowing that this show has as high of a rating as it does, because it doesn't really treat its autistic cast with much respect at all, and just seems content to infantilize them instead for a spectacle. Even oftentimes when the autistic people are on dates in this show, they're not even left alone just to be themselves during the date itself, since the majority of the time, the showrunners are actually off to the side and will audibly prompt the autistic people to perform a specific action or say a specific thing. They don't even bother to hide this at all. This really makes it feel even less like the autistic people here are actually doing anything on these dates on their own and more or less just being corralled by the people on set. Granted, that usually is how most reality TV romance shows work, but even those do a better job at hiding it than this one does. Apparently, this show is often used by neurotypical parents to show to their autistic children as a way to try and encourage them or teach them how to date. Not only is this bad from an autism representation standpoint, but this is also just bad purely from a dating standpoint, believe it or not, as well, since this show is riddled with terrible dating advice and shows many poor examples that go against setting your own boundaries and letting the other person know what you're comfortable with on a date. To give a good example, one of the autistic people shown in the first season of this show is actually a woman named Danny who wants to find a partner who's passionate about animation and also has a good education and sizable job. However, despite this, the showrunners decide to pair her with someone who very much does not match any of her criteria whatsoever. She is paired with a man named Solomon who is not passionate about animation at all, but instead revels in creating poems and also coming up with some of the worst lines in television history.
You know a lot about roses. That's very, like, a good passion that you have.
It's a power of research.
That's really
You never
good.
stop learning.
I love doing research myself, too.
In addition to this, Solomon also seems to want to constantly overstep boundaries that Danny sets for him and her. On their first date, she and Solomon end up sharing a kiss, but afterwards, she feels like it may have been too soon to start doing that. On the second date, as a result, she tells him that she wants to wait before kissing. But then, immediately after being told this, he sits next to her on a bench and turns her head to make her kiss him anyway. What in the world, guys? Why'd you just let this happen? The way this all plays out, it almost feels like the showrunners intentionally chose to pair Solomon with Danny, knowing he wasn't actually a good match for her, but knew he would overstep her boundaries to create extra drama. This especially comes off as incredibly disgusting with Danny being autistic, and knowing how a lot of the time, emotional stimulation like this, or boundaries being crossed, is incredibly hard and often just straight up harmful for an autistic person, since it's amplified for them emotionally more so than a neurotypical person. This is just incredibly wrong for the showrunners to intentionally put Danny through for their show's own benefit, and really hammers home the fact that the show does not actually care about how its autistic people are being treated. To make things even worse, immediately after this, Danny decides she should tell Solomon that they're not compatible, which obviously is a good thing, and it's good she feels courageous enough to do that. But immediately when she does this, Solomon tries to gaslight her by saying she led him on and that he thought she loved him. What do you mean she led you on? She set a boundary for you that you ended up breaking. Nobody was led on here whatsoever except for you apparently thinking this was an okay thing to do. The fact that the showrunners picked someone like this right out of the gate for Danny really is just gross and comes off as them not even having her best interests in mind at all. Overall, Love on the Spectrum is an incredibly poor representation on autism, and honestly, I would consider this one of the worst ones I've ever seen, just as bad as both Music and The Unbreakable Boy. It doesn't bother to show the autistic people it features as real people at all, and just frames them as childlike personalities or animals in a zoo, simply existing for the audience to gawk at and find adorable. This was very hard to sit through. But interestingly enough, I do think that autistic romance can actually be shown well when there's actual effort put in. And I know this because it's actually been done before. Specifically, I want to bring up two big examples of autistic romance being actually done well. That being the 2002 Paul Thomas Anderson film Punch Drunk Love, and also the anime Steins. Specifically, the relationship between Okabe Renshiro and Makase Kirisu, the two main characters of that show, that blossoms throughout it. Let's start with Punch Drunk Love, which actually stars Adam Sandler in its lead role. Yes, you heard that right. Somehow the comedy actor behind movies like The Waterboy for Disney and Happy Gilmore for Universal starred in a much better representation of autistic romance than Netflix could ever hope for. I know, I'm shocked too. This movie is actually notable for being Adam Sandler's first role in a drama as opposed to a comedy, and to me this is probably the best movie he's ever starred in. Here he plays Barry, a socially awkward plunger salesman who has a ton of sisters who are really annoying to him and just straight up abusive oftentimes, often insulting his sexuality and just making fun of him for the things he does overall. Most of his sisters think he needs to start dating and try to push him to do that, which he doesn't want to do, of course. He lives a pretty uneventful life, and he's actually very happy with that, which honestly is great. However, by circumstance, he meets a coworker of one of his sisters with whom he finds he has a natural connection, and she genuinely likes him too, and takes interest in a lot of the seemingly unusual things he likes, which most people around him generally mock him for, just like his sisters. This woman, whose name is Lena, also totally understands his shyness and uncertainty when in various social situations, and is still willing to be there for him despite that and learn more about him. I think especially here, this really works because of how different Lena is shown to be from all the women Barry normally has to deal with in his life. From his incredibly awful sisters to scam artists who try to embezzle him for money after tricking him to having phone sex with them. Many of the women Barry has had in his life are just straight up bad people, which is why he's so uneasy and anxious around women overall. Lena is the first woman he's ever met that's actually willing to show him respect and just true kindness. She's very understanding of his boundaries and lets him move their relationship at his own pace rather than trying to rush it along herself. This is fantastic to see represented so well on film and gives this a huge leg up over Love on the Spectrum, especially when it comes to representing boundaries. Unlike Love on the Spectrum, which seems to be content to try and slap two random autistic people together with no chemistry, regardless or not if they'll respect each other's boundaries, Punch Drunk Love actually takes the time to truly let Lena and Barry's relationship really develop and let them come to truly understand each other and what they desire out of each other and just life overall. This is just a really pleasant, nice film, and if anything, Love on the Spectrum should have just been this. While it's not explicitly stated in this film that Barry is autistic, many people have read him as such, and personally as an autistic person myself, I really see it a lot too. As for the second example of how to actually write and showcase autistic romance, Steins Gate is another piece of media that actually pulls this off incredibly well. Steins Gate stars Okabe Rintaro, a young man living in Akihabara who accidentally discovers time travel with the aid of a young woman named Makase Kirisu, who is also a highly acclaimed scientist and researcher from America. At first, Okabe and Kirisu are very much at odds, with them constantly insulting each other and bickering over everything. But over time, as they learn more about each other, they learn they aren't as different as they thought initially, specifically with their backgrounds and the kinds of people they had to deal with in their past. Kirisu's father was very abusive to her when she was coming up in the world of scientific writing, and as soon as she started making a name for herself, he decided to disown his own daughter and insult her. Okabe had a similar experience growing up, with his only real friend being a young girl named Mayuri, and him feeling the need to mask who he really is to gain the attention of everyone else around him. It's when he meets Kirisu, however, he's finally able to put that mask down and just feel okay being himself. Okabe doesn't necessarily have a fear of women or abuse like Barry does, but he does have a fear that if he starts being himself again, people won't want to be around him, and they might find him boring, but it's Kirisu who ends up making him realize that he doesn't have to mask to be loved by someone. This is honestly a very realistic portrayal of autistic romance, despite the fact it's being shown between two fictionalized anime protagonists. Thank God Steins Gate at least has a higher rating than Love on the Spectrum on IMDb. Overall, even though Love on the Spectrum is a pretty awful representation of autistic romance, I am glad that we actually have other portrayals of autistic romance in things like Punch Drunk Love and Steins Gate that often actually do resonate with a lot of autistic people, instead of just very blatantly being aimed at neurotypical audiences. But what do you think? Is Love on the Spectrum actually good? Am I horribly wrong? And how many of you have seen Steins Gate or Punch Drunk Love before? Let me know down in the comments below. Once again, be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, since I put a lot of effort into these videos, and I do videos on film, television, and video games overall, so if you liked this video, you'll probably like the other ones I have planned as well. Once again, if you have a suggestion for a piece of media you think I should really cover here on YouTube, be sure to join the Discord and put it in the suggestions channel there. You can also check out my letterbox once again to see movies and shows, oftentimes movies and shows I won't cover here on YouTube, and get a taste for my more unfiltered thoughts on a lot of those. Special thanks to Trayvon Gibson and DDC1996 for supporting me over on Patreon, and thanks to Valve Games for being a YouTube member. Patrons and YouTube members actually get 24-hour early access to every video I make and also get their names credited at the end of every video too. But all that aside, I hope you enjoyed today's video. I've been Otterly Noah, and I'll see you on the Otter side. Bye!